Welcome back, everyone, to the final session of this first day of the WCEF+Climate Conference 2021. Great to see you all tuning in from across the world. Can't believe it's the final session already. We are rattling through this. Okay, let's get to business. Joining us digitally, we have the Chief Executive Officer of Royal Phillips, Mr. Frans van Houten. Thank you very much for joining us, Frans. The CEO of the Louders Foundation, Ms. Leslie Johnston. Hello. And the Chief Responsibility Officer and Global Sustainability Services Lead of Accenture, Mr. Peter Lacey, just fixing your webcam there. Thank you very much. And the Senior Director of Environment Supply Chain Innovation at Apple, Miss Sarah Chandler. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. A very beautifully placed ocean we can see behind there. Very good on your poster. And of course, in the studio, I'm joined at the table by my audience liaison. That's your official title, I believe. Yes. Yeah. Eefke van der Wouw. Eefke, welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, though, before talking to our guests, we're going to reflect briefly on the events of today. I know some of you weren't able to tune in earlier, so you can watch along with us.
We need to learn to live within planetary boundaries. That's the whole idea behind the circular economy action plan.
But we need to do that internationally, so everybody is held to the same chart. We can't ask developing countries to do it differently because we've messed it up.
We cannot do it without the circular economy, so we need to start working on that right away.
The circular economy action plan, which is can be only success if it's global.
What we must be able to do is that we must find ways of collaborating.
Do I expect from this forum right now is to consolidate a global community of circular economy.
We have countries, Costa Rica, the EU, the Commissioner, of course, the African Development Bank. This is a shareholder engagement politically from the private sector, the investors, and of course, governments that are deeply in need of this model. But we all are.
Now, what do you think, Eefke? What's your impression?
Well, I think my impression of today basically is that the hopeful tone of voice that we hear, for me as a young person, is really empowering. Because
for us as young people.
For us as young people, I'm sorry, Kenna, for us. It's really empowering because normally we have this narrative of we must stop this and this is what's going wrong. And I feel like this gives us a future to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about looking forward, I'm excited for this session in particular. At least on that wrap-up video, we saw that all the speakers on that video were from the political sphere. And now, of course, we're going to focus on business. So I can't wait to see how we translate what we're going to hear into action, because ultimately that's the goal of the WCEF plus climate. Okay, let us get cracking with our first question. Mr. Van Houten, Phillips sets ambitious goals, and if I'm not mistaken, you aim to put zero waste to landfill by 2025. Why did Phillips decide to take that step, and how does circularity play into that ambition?
Yeah, thank you. Well, what we have heard today is that current levels of consumption run at 1.7 times the resource capacity of our planet, so it's clearly unsustainable. And moreover, a lot of these resources, they end up in landfills or as pollution. And we as a company have said, look, we have an obligation, but it's also an opportunity. And already several years ago, when we were engaged on our Healthy People, Sustainable Planet program, we started to formulate for ourselves very ambitious goals and deep into our organization. So not as a CSR program, but really in our engineering, in our marketing, in our procurement, and adopting targets like sending zero waste to landfill, having carbon neutrality in our operations, taking all electricity from renewable sources. And we formulated goals that we said 70% of our revenue should come from green products that are energy, scarce on energy consumption. And we actually succeeded in all these goals, right? And then you say that taste after more. And then we thought, longer term, what else can we do? And then we were inspired by circularity, by closing the loop on all the products that we deliver into the market. And we said, let's start with medical equipment that we send to hospitals. Can we actually close the loop and take it back and give it a new life? And we developed and discovered new business models. Right? And so that is why I said, first of all, we feel it is an obligation, but it's also a business opportunity. And already today, 15% of our revenue is circular. And our customers start to wake up to it. They like it. Even investors now become conscious of it. So I also would like to take a positive tone and say this is an opportunity. We have to do it, but it is also something that can be fun and not only a chore.
Yeah, that's fantastic. 50% of your revenue is already circular.
15, right? 15.
Oh, 15.
50 is still to come. 15 today.
Now I'm a bit disappointed.
25%.
No, that's already great. Thank you very much. Okay, speaking of ambition, Ms. Chandler, Apple is committed to total carbon neutrality by 2030. What role does a circular economy play in accomplishing that goal? Does it maybe give you a competitive advantage even?
I think it does. So as I'm sure everyone watching knows, many of the resources that our economy depends on are finite. So we see moving to a circular economy as an investment and actually an imperative for the future. And I love the new title of this conference, to add in climate, because in addition to utilizing recycled material for our circular economy goals, it of course also reduces product carbon footprints. So our goal to one day use only recycled and renewable materials in our products and packaging is inherently connected to our goal to become carbon neutral, as you mentioned, by 2030. I really do hope that businesses can see the great potential in helping create a more equitable and just world in the years ahead. And for us, that includes connecting the dots on how a closed loop economy moves us closer to a carbon neutral economy. So to reach our goal, we seek recycled materials that can be used continually without depleting the world's resources. And then we transition, if we can't do that, then we transition to renewable materials. And by doing that, with high quality recycled and renewable materials and building long lasting durable products, we do what's right for the planet and what's right for the customer. So I think, simply put, we don't believe that there's a trade-off between doing well for your company and doing good for the planet.
And being circular. Okay, thanks very much. I'd like to hear from Ms. Johnston shortly, but first of all, let's take a look at what was said earlier today by some of the leaders that we've had at the table here.
Circular economy plays a really key role in solving many of the problems around climate change. But what it also does is it builds a more resilient economy. It solves some of the problems around brittle supply chains because we're less dependent on those raw materials brought across the earth to make those products. It's resilient, it's regenerative, and it really can work in the future, predominantly because it's driven by economics.
The European Commission will present the European Sustainable Product Policy by the end of this year, a policy to make sure that products are designed for circularity from the start. But action in Europe will not be enough. We need the entire world on board. Only with a circular economy can we reach climate neutrality, reverse biodiversity loss, and allow humanity to prosper within planetary boundaries.
The circular economy offers a tremendous opportunity to tackle a wide range of issues that have hindered Africa's development, such as poverty, poor infrastructure, and unemployment, which is of critical importance in the context of post-COVID-19 recovery efforts, as our continent must also put in place the necessary buffers to withstand future shocks.
A circular economy does not just focus on the environment. It reduces the use of resources, waste, and pollution, while it increases productivity and creates new businesses and green jobs. By designing waste and pollution out of economic systems, the transition to a circular economy can achieve multiple objectives.
Let me go first of all to Miss Johnston. At the Louders Foundation, you want to challenge and inspire industry to harness its power for good. What does this mean in practice, and how does the circular economy play a role?
Great. Well, thank you. And well, that is indeed the question. What does this mean in practice? I love Sarah's comments about doing well and doing good at the same time, because for me, the big question is, well, what does good look like? At Loudus, we're working toward a world where you can see global markets made up of companies, industries, investors that actually value people and respect nature. That's very much what our vision statement says. And so for us, good is an inclusive and climate positive economy. Good is circular. We therefore, in my view, need to inspire more businesses. I mean, we're very lucky to have both Phillips and Apple here, which are real leaders in their space. There are a lot of laggards as well, and we need to inspire those businesses to embrace circular solutions because, well, we have to. I think as we heard at this conference today, we are experiencing an urgency, a crisis. The clock is ticking. And if we want to move toward an inclusive economy that is circular, then these solutions, in my view, are a no-brainer. And specifically, why circular solutions? How can that be a solution to what we want to build? Well, first and foremost, such solutions reduce the pressure on planetary boundaries that we heard so much about today. We use less virgin material, we reduce waste, we embrace next-gen solutions. So that is, again, a no-brainer. But they're also good for business. They're good for business in terms of reputation, positioning themselves as sustainability leaders, but also good for business and making it more attractive to investors. We've seen how ESG funds have become more and more popular. Investors will want to direct their money to those businesses doing the right things. But in my honest opinion, I don't think we have a choice. I think ultimately, as we heard from Minister Cog earlier today, circularity shouldn't be a sideshow. Eventually, circularity should give companies a license to operate, particularly in company supply chains, where circular business models can help address these issues around emissions, especially Scope 3. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy. So that's why I'm here representing philanthropy, sitting with a bunch of business colleagues, because philanthropy can play an important role. It can take risks, it can de-risk, it can inspire business and industry to embrace circularity. And we've done that already with initiatives like Fashion for Good, which is really trying to bring more businesses together to support and embrace circular innovations in the fashion industry. Yeah. So we're very excited to do our bit to support. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Mr. Lacey, is that a poster of the SDGs behind you?
It is indeed. Keeping us honest, making sure we're all...
Very good, very good, very good. Did you just put it up?
No, so you can look back over many, many months and years.
Okay. Listen, Accenture's purpose is delivering on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And you're serving over 6,000 clients in more than 120 countries. What is your circular ambition, though? And what is Accenture doing to help other companies, those laggards, as Ms. Johnson pointed out, raise their ambitions?
Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for the invitation, and congratulations to all of you on the growing success of the community in the event. I think it's really important that we have opportunities like this to share and discuss and to think about pushing the boundaries. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity. Secondly, from an Accenture perspective, you probably gave my answer to some extent. Our purpose is human ingenuity and technology applied to the world's and our clients' toughest problems. And, taking it back to your point about the SDGs, well, that is the most incredible business innovation roadmap, market-led innovation roadmap, policy, regulation and policy roadmap for the next decade. And so I think what we need to be framing this is an enormous opportunity, enormous set of embedded opportunities in the kind of transformation that's going to be required to get there. Now, what are we doing at Accenture? Well, it's three things. One, we're making sure that we are embedding circularity into our own business. So we have some ambitious goals by 2025, which I think we'll get to by 2023. I picked up the role internally back in December, and we'll be setting out an even more ambitious program on that front shortly. But I agree with what was said by Sarah in particular. This is not apart from climate change or other areas, circularity. For me, this is a way of looking at a truly different future economy. So we need to think in a much more systemic way across our organisation as to how that plays out and how we put that into all parts of our business. One, it's about a large company like ourselves, 540,000 people, 110 offices around the world, actually making sure we're walking the talk. Two, it is about our core business. This is Frans's point. It's our existing business. We have a program which Julie Sweet, our CEO, put in place with me last year, which is called Sustainability by Design, which is about embedding this into our core business and where we're going to grow in areas like cloud, for example, cloud computing, and how we think about the transition from servers on site to shared servers and shared computing power, devices, recovery, recycling, reuse, the material supply chains that have been mentioned several times. So that is about systematically going through every area of a $45 billion company and making sure that we are putting circularity, sustainability in each of those areas in relevant ways, not tick box ways. And then the third piece is making sure this is part of our service provision where clients need additional support on their journeys and where we bring something unique related to the disruptive value of technology and new business models. And so, for example, what we put out, and Frans was very much a part of this, we've supported things like the platform for accelerating the circular economy globally with the WEF. We recently published a book, an analysis, the Circular Economy Handbook, to identify $4.5 trillion in opportunity to 2030 for companies that deploy these new models, these new products, these new services, waste designed out, products looped back, growth decoupled, materials kept in productive use. That's what it's about for us, really. Where we can have the biggest impact is where it becomes part of our client value proposition and making sure that we help our clients on their journeys, working with our partners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lacey. And what I find what really struck me about what you said was the first thing, like this kind of shifting the narrative around the SDGs to looking at them as a business. Did you say business regulation roadmap?
No, I think it is a business innovation roadmap.
Business innovation.
But if you look at the SDGs,
exactly.
It's the best codified ever business innovation roadmap. I also think it is a roadmap for policy and regulation to support that.
Yeah, very exciting. Ms. Chandler, does Apple see the SDGs in a similar way? Could it be an innovation roadmap for Apple as well?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of what we're talking about here is really looking at kind of how does this work evolve and what does that roadmap look like? And for us, I think, we're really I take a lot of what Leslie said to heart. Circularity should not be a sideshow. It's central. It's not philosophy. It's not philanthropy. It's a tactical business roadmap. And so, for us, I think a lot of that comes down to things like how are we finding challenges and then how are we innovating past them? So one, just very tactically for us, we set out to solve this challenge around traditional electronics recycling. It really relies on shredding today that degrades the quality and amount of the material you can get back. It mixes everything together, makes it really hard to recover. And so, we've been really looking at this with some incredible partners around the world to say, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better business model. And I think you do see things like the SDGs come into that to say, okay, what can we really innovate here and where can we push past and where can we find a better way? And so for us, that's been, many years innovating in the space of material recovery. We need to be able to get materials back from our products in order to put recycled material into our products. And if we're all accepting that you can just degrade the material, it doesn't really work. So for us, we created Daisy to help us take devices apart, see if we could keep key materials that are found inside the device separate, recover them at higher rates, higher purity. It turns out we can. And it's been a really incredible journey for us. I mean, Daisy can recover 1.2 million iPhone devices per year. She disassembles them.
Daisy a little bit later, because I think we need to explain who she is. But that's one for our viewers to find out about shortly. Let's bring it back a little bit to make it a bit more personal. Like, to what extent does circularity play a role in all of our lives? Eefke, do you live in a circular way?
I do, very much. It's like integrated into everything.
Oh, wow.
I was thinking about this, and I came here by public transportation. So this is my mother's sweater, so I borrowed it. I buy a lot of secondhand, almost everything. So it's basically become a part of who I am, but it's been a process of many years. Like, it can be done in a day. And I think this global transition is also really a personal transition, because we are this global population of individuals eventually. So I am actually really curious as well, Mr. Lacey, if you have any examples of circularity at your home or your private life.
Well, I always think that physical examples, practical examples are better than theoretical ones. So I'll give you three that I've got with me today. So, I think the pandemic itself has obviously reduced travel enormously, and some of the elements of circularity that I think about productive use of assets and productive use of our carbon allocations is important. Now, for us personally, I will, after the pandemic, never go back to normal travel, and we will have made that decision as a business that we won't go back to normal travel, business as usual, or travel by default. So this is an example here of Oculus Rift, where you're actually able to have incredibly powerful experiences and meetings that we're increasingly putting together that decouple the need for the carbon intensity and material intensity of travel. We won't move to a zero travel world, but we will forever, I think, be better at using technologies to connect and to use that as a default rather than necessarily as the exception. So that's one example, the Oculus Rift, using that a lot. A second good example, so you can see behind me, this is my gilet, my waistcoat, made entirely from Coca-Cola bottles, Pepsi bottles, and aluminium cans. And what I love about it is it's upcycled. You can see the zip as well. So what I love about it is, I think it speaks to your point, which is that we're trying to make sure that circularity or recovered or recycled materials, to your point, to Sarah's point, to Leanne's point, they are aspirational, that they're not considered somehow inferior, and that it's part of fashion, circularity. So that's hopefully not too unfashionable. And the final example I'll give you, my briefcase, which is Elvis and Cress, which is a wonderful company here in the UK that recovers and recycles used fire hoses from fire stations. So this one's probably done 25, 30 years. It actually, if you smell it, still smells a little bit of the fires. What I love about it is it's actually sort of at the higher end of the spectrum, more like an LVMH or similar. But it saved people's lives. What could be more aspirational than that? That you're carrying your laptop, something that saved people's lives, lives saved people's lives that would have otherwise gone to landfill, but been upcycled in an incredible way. So there are many other examples. I'm not perfect. I'm on a journey as well. But just three examples of practical things that I think are emerging and are part of behavior change.
You've raised the bar very high. Good grief.
I'm quite disappointed, actually, that you're not wearing the glasses right now in this session, but, maybe later. Okay, thank you. I hope you can still hear us. It looks great on you. Ms. Johnston, do you have anything to add from your own personal experience?
Yeah, well, it's hard to compete with the Oculus Rift. I'm impressed, Peter, but I have to say, I'm lucky to live in Switzerland. So every morning I wake up with my glass bottle and I walk to a farm to get my full-fat, non-pasteurized milk. So I haven't bought any PET bottles for years. Very proud of that. Everything I'm wearing is secondhand. And in fact, I think that my wardrobe choices, I probably need someone to help me with my style choices, but I've really narrowed it down to the essentials. I was actually a couple years ago fundraising for a labor rights organization, and where I basically wore only 6 items of clothing over a 6-week period.
Wow.
Which actually made me realize you can save on clothing, but then you spend a lot on the washing. So where's the environmental impact of that? But I try my best. And I think it's harder in a place like Switzerland. I think other markets, especially the Netherlands, the US.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more options for
Miss
resale.
Chandler and Mr. Houten, secondhand clothing, big fans?
I am. I'm a huge fan of secondhand clothing. I also rent a lot of my clothes. And in fact, this is rented.
Rented especially
I have
for
to
us.
be
Great.
honest. No second-hand clothing for me, but we do recycle all waste and we compost all organic materials and we use it back in the garden or in the vegetable plot.
Wow, wonderful. Now,
Very impressed. I think you all really walk the talk. Yeah.
Mr. Van Houten, on another note, I mean, you're chair of the board of the platform for accelerating the circular economy, or PACE, as it's called. It's the name's been dropped a few times in previous sessions. A very important collection of members. You've also set the bar quite high with Phillips' level of ambition. So let's take a quick look at a short video first before we go further.
At Phillips, our strategy is aligned with UN Sustainable Development Goals 3, 12, and 13. Number 12 calls for sustainable consumption and production patterns. By 2025, we aim to generate 25% of our revenue from circular products, services, and solutions, with all our products and services being developed in line with eco-design requirements, minimizing environmental impact. We design for reuse, repair, and refurbishment from the outset. We adopt innovative business models based on offering our customers access to our products and solutions rather than ownership. This way, we can maximize the lifetime value of our products, optimize usage, and ensure that value is retained for as long as possible. By 2025, we will offer a trade-in on all professional medical equipment and take care of responsible repurposing. For instance, with our refurbishment facilities in the Netherlands and the United States. We are also working to become circular in our own operations. We are embedding circular practices at our sites, and by 2025, we'll put zero waste to landfill. Furthermore, we are building multi-stakeholder coalitions like PACE, the global platform for accelerating the circular economy. Only together can we drive the transition we need to make.
Now, I'll be honest, Mr. Houten, I think you need a new voiceover for that video, but I'll let that slide for the moment. Tell me, it's now where you set some targets there, 2025, I heard, but we're in 2021 now. Is Philips on track to achieve those targets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, we are slightly ahead of our plan. And as I said in the first question some time ago, customers resonate with it. And increasingly, we can already now take medical equipment back and give it a second life. We also have a few hurdles, however, and that we also need to address. That is why it is really important that we associate ourselves together and have these debates. And also in the platform for circular economy, that we can take away any hurdles.
What's the biggest hurdle that you're facing?
Well, so let's take the notion of what is new, the definition of the word new. Right? If we recycle plastic and we don't use virgin plastic and we build a new consumer product or a medical product from recycled plastics, in several countries we get into trouble because there are chemical legislation rules that prevent you from using recycled materials. There are procurement rules from governments or hospitals that say, well, we are only allowed to buy new. But what is new if I refurbish and the product delivers the service and I guarantee the quality of the service, then I would argue that in the procurement rules, we should look at total cost of ownership and benefit and actually encourage that the product is made out of recycled materials, right? And then there's also some transboundary restrictions on transporting a refurbished medical product from one country to the next. Right? And so these are all very practical examples that stand in the way. And what's great to hear Vice President of the Commission, Frans Timmermans, talk today that they will come up with better rules, because there are still some hurdles to overcome. And otherwise, as we overcome those, we can go even faster. Because economically and from a business model point of view, it is really attractive for both the customer and for us as a company to embrace these circular practices even faster.
Yeah. And I saw you nodding there, Mr. Lacey, when Mr. Van Houten was talking about the obstacles. Obviously, obstacles may be specific to the industry that he's in, but are there, what sort of obstacles is Accenture facing in your drive, ambition to be circular? Oh, we're here. If you can unmute, we can't hear you for a second. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the phrase of the last 12, 18 months, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry. So I thought you were going to ask the question slightly differently. What are the major barriers in the market? Frans and I have worked very, very extensively together, so I agree with what he says on the PACE platform and some of the themes. I would say, let me answer in two parts. One, the market at the moment, if you take a pure economics perspective, there are too many externalities, right? That we need to internalize the real cost within markets through policy, through regulation, to send pricing signals that benefit high performers, the leaders, not the laggards, to your point earlier, right? So there are lots of mechanisms for that around circularity, sub-mechanisms. That is one of the biggest barriers, I would say. The pricing, the real cost is not part of the way that we set up our economies. If you look at Accenture side of things, look, the big three things for us that make or break an area of our business are our partners, our people, and our clients. Right. So what do I mean by that? A huge percentage of our growth comes from our partnerships with our ecosystem partners, from software players, from cloud providers, where we're working with them to solve problems with companies. So we need them to move at the same pace as us. And so that's part of it. It's about making sure that the rewiring of the global economy to measure, to manage, to underpin with technology, sustainability and circular economy is there. The second thing is with people, we call it our sustainability quotient, right? So if you think about your intelligence, we need to develop them. We need to have leadership development, learning, understanding at all levels, from the board right down to new joiners. And it needs to be part of the education, the curriculum, all of the ways we think about that, as well as who we hire and what companies we acquire. Right? So that's a very important piece of the journey. And we're not there, and it's we really need to do more on that. But we're proud of what we've done to date.
Let me pick up on something that you mentioned. Sorry, go ahead. Mention the third thing briefly, then I'd like to...
I was just going to say the third is clients, which is for the first time, I would say in the last 12 to 18 months, other than there are real leaders out there, like we just heard, like Apple, like Phillips, who've been at this for a while, right? But that is not the majority of businesses still. And so the real story for us is we need to work synergistically with our clients to move either one step or at the same pace, but not two steps ahead of them, and certainly not behind them. So we do need that approach to end-to-end value chain, supply chains, really, for us to be able to help apply human ingenuity and technology. Sorry, you were going to add something.
Yeah, so synchronicity in the progress is important. One thing you mentioned, though, the real pricing of products. I mean, I think about that in the context of Apple. If that were the case for Apple products, how well do you think Apple would score, Ms. Chandler?
In terms of real pricing?
Yeah, factoring in the environmental footprint of products.
I think quite well. I mean, I think when we really look at how we bring together a product, we're looking at this holistic nature. Apple's been looking at a comprehensive carbon footprint for all of our business for over a decade now, and publishing that, really turning to the data and looking at that. So we take a very data-driven response.
Yeah. Okay. And Ms. Johnson, I saw a little bit of a smile there. Was that one of support, or what do you think?
I always smile. I'm a very optimistic person working in philanthropy. No, I actually think, from our perspective, and I can talk a little bit more about our theory of change, but I think the challenge I see with companies that are trying to do the right things is the system in which they're operating. And we don't have the right parameters and incentives in the system to essentially reward the leaders and also push, as I said earlier, the laggards up. And so as a foundation, we're doing a lot around thinking about what are the rules of the system and how can we use our philanthropic capital to work with partners who can advocate for better incentives. And that could be policy incentives, it could be standards, it could be elements that essentially, create more of a level playing field and allow the leaders to lead and hopefully inspire the others. So I wasn't smiling, I was smiling in solidarity because I think that it's really important that we have leaders that can show this is the way we can do it, but we also need better policy to support the rest of the industries.
Is there a policy you have in mind that could sufficiently create a kind of new ecosystem for circular businesses to thrive?
The magical circular policy. Well, I think there's a lot of really great things in the European Green Deal. One thing that we've been working very heavily on is the mandatory human rights due diligence that, as you probably know, has been sweeping Europe. And there's a lot of really exciting initiatives and activities underway with that. And what I like about that is it makes it a requirement. It makes it a license to do business, to actually know what's going on in your supply chain and be more accountable for it. We're supporting 7 partners that are essentially trying to take this sort of European ambition around that and bring it to national legislation and make sure that the voices of workers and labor organizations and movements is also heard. And so that is something that I think can create, even though it says it's human rights due diligence, it's actually human rights and environmental practices. Mm-hmm. So that can create the right framework to allow companies to lead.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we upscale action. And before we do that, let's take a quick look at this video from Accenture. Like the movie says, the challenge the challenge in front of us is huge, and one way to overcome these challenges is through partnerships. Mr. Lacey, I understand that Accenture is working with the UN Global Compact. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, so goal 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is collaboration. We think it's fundamental. I mentioned before our partnerships with our ecosystem partners. But I think that includes partnerships that actually, from a circular economy perspective, very few companies control that value chain, if any. So, by design, as we re-engineer global value chains and supply chains, we need to find ways to collaborate. The UN Global Compact is a great way to do that. World Economic Forum is a great way to do that. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, all 3 of which we partner with. The Global Compact example is a good one because through the work we've done on the UN SDG ambition, so the program there is basically to set out a framework that really any business can incorporate strategically into their business and operationally into their business. And then finally, in a way that actually they can integrate it into their performance measurement management systems, both internally and externally, so they can be able to use that as decision-making tools, that actually allow them to make better decisions at every level, but also to be able to communicate with external stakeholders and with shareholders. So that program itself, is a good example. The member companies of the Global Compact, we now have 600 signed up to the SDG ambition. So it's a good example of scale. Started with just us, with SAP and with 3M. Now 650 companies signed up. But I think we're still scratching the surface, but not bad for 12 to 18 months of working together. And that's a good example of us working with the UN, but also with our ecosystem partners like SAP, like Salesforce, like Microsoft, to build out some of these solutions that are required as we rewire the global economy so that we measure circular and sustainability alongside financial performance at every level, from GDP versus SDGs through to companies and their performance on circularity and sustainability, through to individuals within organisations making decisions that need new information, new data, new ability to make better decisions.
And have Phillips and Apple signed up to that? Are they one of the 650 companies?
Of course. I'm
of
sure
course.
If they haven't signed, I'm sure it's in principle aligned with what they would be doing. I'm sure. I don't know the answer.
Oh, you're so kind to them, Mr. Lacey. You're so kind to them. Well done.
No, they are both leaders in the field. They've both been at this a long time.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Houten. Yeah, Van Houten.
Well, if I can build on what Peter says.
Yes.
Right. So it's important to have first commitment, which is the compact. Then you need to also have a measurement system, and society should demand from all companies that they report on how sustainable they are. So we report that in our annual report, and on all the aspects of circularity. By the way, also on other aspects of ESG. We publish more than 30 KPIs in our performance indicators. Right now, if everybody does that, you can start holding people accountable. If you then also price waste and CO2 emissions, you can actually force the business model to evolve and change. So I think we are on the right path. It's just going awfully slow, but let's say all the forces are moving in the right direction. And in that sense, what Peter Lacey said about the SDGs being a business innovation agenda, I agree, and it is working because we talk now all about sustainability and circularity and CO2 and all the other things. It's just that it took us an awful long time.
And you're also chair of PACE. Why did you decide to join this organisation, and why are those sorts of partnerships important?
Yeah, look, I'm a regular participant at the World Economic Forum. I think that you're in a very privileged position, and I also believe we all need to step up and play our role as leaders. Now, what PACE does, the Platform to Accelerate Circular Economy, is actually become a voice of all the good circular practices that already exist, or the knowledge of an Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and start bringing this and propagating it across the world. To Africa, to Chile, to China.
How do you do that in practice? Because we've heard people...
Well, by networking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in practice, you collect the best practices, you write them up into good messages and reports and learnings, and then you bring it to others. And you do that through networking. And so PACE is basically a networking organization where governments and businesses and NGOs can come together in a neutral way, and we quickly align on which best practices can be scaled. Mm-hmm. So it gives circular economy a voice, a platform. We can amplify it. We can also collaborate in a way that is, from an antitrust point of view, possible. Mm-hmm. I give you an example. Mm-hmm. Phillips is working together with several other capital equipment companies across the world. In the meantime, tens of companies, and we are exchanging best practices. You would say normally, hey, competitors exchanging knowledge and information, make that visible. But it is great in how Phillips and Dell and HP and ABB and many other companies can actually learn from each other to embed circular design practices in your product creation process and in your business model. So this is what PACE does. It creates a way to work together.
And another partner of PACE is, of course, Apple. Apple, Ms. Chandler, not a company known for sharing its technology, its IP or anything. But so to what extent is Apple also a contributor sharing its knowledge as part of PACE?
Yeah, I mean, this is the area that we hope everyone copies, right? Our environmental work is an area where we're very open and also very much sharing our progress along the way. So I think that to kind of echo some of the comments that Peter and Frans were making, there's certainly, we need to accelerate the pace. And I think, pun intended, pace is an incredible partner to do that with. But there are things that are actually moving really quickly. So, we're lucky enough to be able to look across a very broad, very global supply chain with a lot of materials and say, okay, if we're going to build out of 100% recycled and renewable content, how are we going to do that? And we were able to turn, for example, to data on all of the materials used in our products, profile each of those materials on environmental, economic, and societal risk, and say, these are the 14 we're starting with. We actually published, it's on our website, there's a white paper there of how we did that with all of the third-party data sources that we used, and I hope that others can therefore start where we are rather than start where we were, because it is a lot of work to kind of wrap your business around where are our priorities and where are we really going to start. And I really want to echo some of the comments that were made earlier by Frans in terms of what we need to enable a circular economy. I think it's really important that we not lose Leslie's point that we have to all come together on this. So I mentioned Daisy briefly earlier.
Yeah.
We have Daisy operating in the United States. We have her in the Netherlands. She's really awesome, can disassemble all these different models of iPhone, very efficient,
yes, exactly.
operational
So tell me,
model for how you take
what
things
is
apart,
Daisy?
keep
You
them
said she
separate.
can
But if we
disassemble
can't ship
products?
things,
She's a robot? She's just a really fast
she's a
assembly
robot
line
that
worker? Who is
disassembles
Daisy?
iPhone. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so Daisy disassembles 15 different models of iPhone. She takes them into their components, and then she has a partner robot, Dave, who can take those components down to materials. This is how we get really high quality materials that can go right back into our product without degrading customer quality at all. It's how we break this idea that recycled materials are inferior. They're not. They're just collected right now in an inferior way. But if you can keep them separate, they're wonderful, the great finish and durability that all of our customers love and expect. But if we don't go back to Leslie's point, and I think Frans was bringing this up too, you need to be able to move those materials around the world in order to build out of them again. And so I think when we talk about collaboration and partnership and the opportunity of groups like PACE and this conference, it's to come together on how we solve some of these challenges so that we keep the very important protections for people in our supply chain, in our recycling chains, but we also enable a level playing field for recycled material and mined material.
Okay. But Ms. Johnston, as someone who, you work across different industries with the Louders Foundation, you know what circular means. I mean, yeah, when you're talking about a smartphone, I kind of wonder how circular can a smartphone be if, say, your camera doesn't work and you just need to replace just the camera, and that's not possible on a product. You need to replace the entire phone. How is that circular in your mind? Is that just another type of circularity?
Are you asking me or are you asking
I'm asking you, Ms. Johnson, first of all, and then we can go to Ms. Chandler. I'm curious what you think, objectively.
I guess, what is circular? I think ultimately, and this kind of gets to sort of maybe the approach of philanthropy, because when we're looking at how do you create this larger scale systems change we need to see where the entire world can embrace circularity, because that is what we need to move toward an inclusive economy. That means it's not just about a product and replacing parts, that's elements of it, but it's about a change in mindset, a change in rules of the system, and even a change in the power dynamics in the system. And I think that sometimes circularity and the discussions around it fall short because we often forget about people. So I was very happy to hear people mentioned in this discussion. I think that a company, let's just use a fashion company because we do a lot of work in fashion, could make the decision to reshore because from a materials perspective, a climate perspective, logistics perspective, it makes more sense to bring production back home. That could be a good thing from a circularity perspective, but it could also lead to tens of thousands of jobs being lost in Asia. Mm-hmm. So how do we balance that? So when I think of circularity, for me, it's not just the product, it's not just the materials, it's the entire system, and how can we ensure that both people and nature can thrive?
Okay. Eefke, what do you think? Are you satisfied with what you're hearing?
Well, in general, I'm becoming more and more optimistic from the things I hear. I hear a lot of action already. I just have one big worry, and I think, again, sorry, Ms. Johnson, that this question might be a question for you, because right now we're in the midst of a pandemic. We can expect to have more shocks, economic shocks in the future, as we have more extreme weather conditions, mass migrations, which will change the consumer patterns and maybe production patterns. How are we supposed to deal with these things while transitioning to a circular economy?
Well, it's a great question, and I think probably amongst the panelists, there's probably some really good answers. I think from my perspective, this is where we really need leadership from the government and policy side. And that's what's happening now in many national governments. And we heard a lot earlier today about that. It's all very inspiring. But now is the moment. I mean, we have an opening in the clouds, essentially, to design what a green recovery can look like and how to make sure that people can continue to have dignified work and thrive in this period of transition. I mean, to me, COVID, this pandemic, has actually shown the cracks in the system, and it's the system that's broken. So now is a chance to, I think you said, Peter, rewire the economic system. That's what we have to do. So again, I'm very optimistic, and I really do think that now is the time for leadership to step up, both on the public side and the private side. And we're seeing it already. So that's needed. I don't know if the others, especially on the business side, want to add to that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's absolutely right. I think, so I mean, in some form or another, I've been doing, I've been involved in sustainability for 24 years now. Going back to my first ever project in geothermal energy in Costa Rica. And I would say I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been, to Leslie's point. That, why am I optimistic? I'm not naive. And I'm not complacent, but I'm optimistic. Why? One, I think for the reasons that you mentioned, Leslie, I think, look, what are the three major drivers of scale at speed? Right? For me, it is very clearly policy, technology, people. Right? Those are the three things that will change and rewire the global economy. On policy, you look at the three biggest trading blocks: North America, China, US, China, and Europe. All three really stepping up. China decarbonising by 2030, 100%, 50%, 100% by 2060. The Biden administration re-signing Paris, TCFD, building into post-pandemic, the European Green Deal. There is reason to be optimistic on policy. On technology, we have all of the technologies we need already available to us to deliver circularity and the SDGs. We need to invest $6 trillion a year, according to Bank of America and the UN, every year to 2030 to do that, but they exist. The digital, physical, biological technologies, sometimes called the fourth industrial revolution, those are now, I think, available to us in ways that if we put them together in the right ways to underpin new business models, new ways of engaging with consumers, customers, that they are all there. And finally, to the point that Leslie makes about people, I would say yes to making sure that we balance the trade-offs, and absolutely to the exact trade-offs she made in terms of jobs versus some of the economics and environmental decisions, but also people in the round, people as employees, people as consumers, people as citizens, people as members of civil society and NGO groups. I'm a member of many NGOs personally. And so I think it's that integrated agenda and that integrated identity. People are connecting the dots now for the first time. So I'm not complacent, I am not naive, but I am much more optimistic in the last 12 to 18 months than I've ever been that we are on the brink of systems change.
So, Mr. Lacey, maybe a follow-up question if we have time for that. Because I'm hearing a lot about policy, and it's quite a critical question again, but how do we and businesses as well deal with countries who just do not seem to come near the Paris Agreement with their policies? Like, what kind of role does a business have in those kind of countries? Do we say we are still in, we will do it anyway, or is that not possible?
Great question.
It's a I would say not only is it a very, very good question that myself, our CEO, Julie Sweeten, and our executive board, my peers, that we wrestle with. It isn't just a country conversation; it's an industry conversation and even an individual client conversation. I think just as financial services companies have had to start to divest from coal, or have divested over time under huge amounts of pressure from investors, professional services firms have to think very carefully about which countries, and will have to do even more so into the future. Now, if a company, an industry, or a country is on a journey, on a transition, and we think we can help, then I think that is one thing. If one is adamant that they are not going to be part of the future that we believe is necessary, that incorporates sustainable development and that is powered by the twin engines of sustainability and technology, then I think we need to think increasingly very, very hard. And there are examples, I wouldn't be able to talk about them publicly, but there are examples where we have turned down work because we don't think our values are aligned. And we will continue to do that. I think the whole industry will have to take a very long, hard look at itself about who it does business with and where it places its expertise.
And should we ask the same question to Apple and Phillips?
Yeah,
Ms. Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm very optimistic. I share the other panelists' view that I'm actually more optimistic than I've ever been about these topics. I think the last year has really caused a lot of folks to look holistically at how they are in the world and the things that they use. And I hope that looking at things like more and more recycled content and products that are really enduring and can be used again and again, transact again and again. So many were talking about circular models. We see that, for example, a lot of our customers use our trade-in program and bring their phones back, and the cycle continues. And so I think I share the optimism. I think actually that's been the great lesson for me of the last year, despite obvious, very significant hardships and real tragedy for so many. I do think that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I do think that this changes the way that we interact with one another and the way that we interact with products and with commerce. And I'm very optimistic about that.
Yeah. But your question was more about doing business with in countries or with countries where...
Well, yeah, the thing I've noticed, because I was present at COP24, I think, was that especially the United States then made a statement by still being present there and saying, literally, we're still in. And I was very impressed by that statement because it changed my mindset, because who do you look to, who do you turn to for leadership? And that could also be different parties.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of my optimism comes from I'm lucky to work where I work, and we've had a CEO that was very clear that we were still in, even when maybe the country had a different view from a policy perspective. We've been pretty clear that our debate on climate change is over, and that for Apple, we're focusing on taking action. And so it's certainly a lot of my optimism comes from where we are looking at the global perspective. I do think that there's a lot that really has caused governments and people to come together and say, we don't need to live in these silos. We can look at health and economy and justice and environment as mutually beneficial things.
Okay, and talking about action, let's round up everyone, and let's tell me what's the first thing you're going to do tomorrow, or when it comes to boosting the circular economy in your own company. What can you do? What concrete step are you going to take?
Well, I still link it also to the previous conversation because, great policies and technology and people, but in the end, it is about taking action and ownership. That applies to companies, it applies to consumers. If we change our behaviors and we are consequent around it and we apply it everywhere, then the world will follow. I think that is the best positive way that we can take. We have made public our commitments to go circular, to go CO2 neutral, no waste to landfill, and to link our innovation power to SDG 3, health and well-being for everybody. So we have already transformed the company, and I hope that Phillips can be an inspiration for other companies to do it. We work with all our suppliers, 10,000 of them, and we help them evolve to a circular and sustainable model. Right? So we take the suppliers along, and that's, I think, also an answer to your earlier question. Should you not do business in a country if they are not committed? It's the task of the leaders to take the others along. right? And that is how you create a movement, and it is far more positive than just saying no. So that is what we'll do every day, and that is what I will do tomorrow.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, Mr. Van Houten, to come up with a target like the one that Phillips has set, what's the process that goes before that? How long does the company take to decide to do something like that? Just briefly.
We started on eco-design 15 years ago, and we have raised the bar every 5 years. And then we've added things like CO2 and climate and social aspects.
But is this something then
so it's a learning curve.
we should be worried about, Ms. Johnson? If it takes a company 15 years, for all the companies out there that have not yet at least publicly announced their own targets, are they going to take another 15 years to decide what their targets are?
Well, we don't have 15 years, and I think that's the benefit that Phillips and other leaders have had. They've had the time to figure it out and actually, provided the inspiration for others. I do think that's where philanthropy can play a unique role. I mean, keep in mind, philanthropy is a minuscule amount of funding in the larger scheme of things compared to what companies generate, compared to what finance is. But philanthropy can play a role by essentially trying to de-risk catalyze some of those, as I said earlier, laggards. And I do think the opportunity for me, what am I going to do to commit to circularity is I really do think there's a need to get funders to wake up a little bit and actually start embracing circularity as part of their strategies. If you're a funder and you fund climate mitigation, you should fund circularity. If you fund just transition, you should fund circularity. If you're funding advocacy for policy change, you should fund circularity. I mean, it's obvious that circularity can be that means to the end that we all want, but the philanthropic world has not yet embraced that. So that's my commitment, is try to bring more funders along.
And very briefly, Mr. Lacey and Ms. Chandler, let's start with you. Mr. Lacey, what is your commitment to circularity?
My commitment tomorrow morning is that I'm joining you from Houten, so I'm going to walk my dog by the river with my family. But on Monday, I commit to fully and further integrating this into what we do, our core products. Frans mentioned eco-design. Ours is called sustainability by design. But also to work with really one of the heart of what we can do to transform the global economy, or in a small way, right? Each of us only in a very small way, even the scale of the businesses we have here, but it's to integrate that and to shape that with our clients, with our people, and with our partners, and to make sure that we align the digital revolution with the sustainability revolution to produce a circular economy.
Thank you very much. And you have the final word, Ms. Chandler.
I mean, we're all in. So we are aiming to make all of our products using only recycled and renewable material. We will be carbon neutral. We are already carbon neutral for our own operations. We'll be carbon neutral across our entire supply chain and all of our products by 2030, including all of our suppliers running on renewable energy. And we're going to do all that using the safest materials that we can. So we're fully on board and moving as fast as we can, and can't wait to see what comes next.
Great to hear. Thank you very much, all of you, for your contributions today.
Thank you so much.
And that was it, folks. But this was only day one. So what's coming up tomorrow? We'll focus on youth. There'll be a session on circularity in heavy industries hosted by the World Economic Forum, and we'll learn more about circular economy metrics, I should say. Eefke, is there a particular session there that you're looking forward to?
Definitely the youth one, I think.
The youth one?
Yep, definitely.
Not the circular economy metrics?
Maybe. I'm so inspired by, people my age these days, because we've really driven the agenda.
People our age.
I'm sorry.
Keep making this mistake.
People our age.
Our age.
Yeah.
All right. Of course. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I am looking forward to the session on youth as well, and I'd say that you definitely have more than enough reasons to tune in again tomorrow and follow all the interesting sessions we still have coming up. So on that note, I will see you tomorrow at 9:45 a.m. Central European Time when the WCEF+Climate conference continues.